Who'd like to get the bidding underway at 3,800,000, 3,900,000, 4.1, 4.5 million, 4.7. Can I say 5 million? 550, 5.6, 5.9, 6.1 million. We are sold. Congratulations.
Across Australia, house prices are near record levels. Where prices go next will depend heavily on where interest rates peak and how long they stay there.
I think it's gotten a lot harder. The main thing is getting the loan from the banks.
I will keep trying, yeah, until I found the dream home.
For much of 2023, the property market defied the odds.
It's going to be tricky for the market to replicate a 7% growth rate.
But finding a home is getting harder.
Have everything ready before you go to the auction.
In many capital cities, there's just not enough properties up for sale.
We have seen record levels of migration. We've built around 50,000 too few homes.
That's also putting pressure on rents, which are at all-time highs.
The problem I had was I was competing with 50 other people each time. There's a lot of people that I know that have just had to go home or give up pretty much their dream of their own home.
So what can we expect in 2024? We ask the experts. With me now is Chief Auctioneer at Auction Works, Jesse Davidson. Thank you so much for your time. Jesse, you just dropped the hammer on a $6 million auction here in Sydney. The market is still hot.
Still buzzing along beautifully for the right property, there's no doubt about that, and I think this is an example that good quality property still sells no matter the market conditions.
And who are you seeing the buyers?
Yeah, so look, we're seeing a good mix. We're starting to see first home buyers coming back into the pool, not on this property today, of course. We're starting to see a lot more first home buyers. The investor, I think, is starting to see a little bit more value as we're seeing increases in rents, but also the home buyer. I think we're seeing a little bit more of that as well, where families are willing to probably spend a little bit more to find the property that they can stay in for sort of generations to come.
For those attending auctions, what kind of tips could you give them to be ready on the day?
Auction is a very intense 15 or 20 minutes, and for a buyer it's very easy to get caught up in the auction space and pay a little bit more than you would have liked to pay. So my tip is to do your due diligence. It's to come with a limit, and it's most importantly to stop at that limit.
If you have to be in a different location, perhaps you're overseas or interstate, how is it best to utilise someone on the other end of the phone?
There's two ways. You either engage with that buyer over the phone to just do the exact instructions that you are notifying them to do, or you effectively give them your limit and you allow them to go about bidding on that property as they wish. Typically a buyer's agent will take your instruction and then go about the strategy as they feel fit, I suppose, for that property. But sometimes we find people want to have a little bit more control over the strategy and the way that they bid. So they'll sit back and often just ask the agent or the party on the other end of the phone just to hold up, and they'll make the calls when they make them. Which is either way works, right?
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much for your time.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you very much. Cheers.
The housing market has seen a V-shaped recovery in 2023, but there are signs the boom is easing. The fastest pace of rate hikes on record has hit affordability in our largest capital cities and even led to price falls. Depending on where you live, prices are moving at very different speeds. Here's Rachel Papazzoni.
This is one of Australia's hottest property markets, and competition among buyers at this auction is heating up.
Make no mistakes about it, if there is no further bidding.
This house in Adelaide sells for $785,000. The real estate agent says he's seeing a lot of interest from people coming from overseas.
75,000 people are going to come into Adelaide over the next 2 years. It's 30,000 houses. There's not many at the moment. Yeah.
The buyer of the deceased estate was this man's cousin calling in from New York.
So gut the whole inside, renovate, and then she'll retain it and rent it out.
With fewer properties up for sale here, prices are expected to stay strong. Across the Bass Strait, it's a different story. Prices in Hobart began correcting in 2022 after surging 45% through COVID. It's where Chelsea Vladik wants to buy. She's been looking for a home for 2 years.
I think it's getting more affordable than it was the last couple of years.
This house is on the market for more than $1.6 million. The owners are hoping they get the asking price.
There's been lots of people coming through, so it's just about finding the right buyer.
Prices rose just under 1% nationally in November, totalling 7% for the year. Darwin, Melbourne and Hobart saw declines, while Sydney home values slowed. The prices continue to soar in Adelaide, Brisbane and Perth.
Demand is now being deflected away from those higher price points towards the more middle to lower end of the marketplace.
Supply is most restricted here in Perth. The city posted a fall in the number of properties available during spring. The number of homes available here is almost half the 5-year average, while the number of buyers is well above average. So prices have risen at their fastest pace since March 2021. In Brisbane, cashed-up buyers are ready to spend. Bids for this family home climb and climb. It sells for more than $2.1 million to an interstate investor. Here, there's an expectation among buyers that interest rates may have peaked.
I think we know roughly now where it's going to end up. So based on that, we're starting to see a few more buyers pop up. They're out in force and they're ready to go.
Property expert Louis Christopher warns the real danger for prices will be if people lose their jobs as the economy slows down.
If we go into recession, I've no doubt we'll see another fall in housing prices. Recession means a rise in unemployment. A rise in unemployment means more defaults in the housing market, and more defaults means housing price falls.
More loss-making short-term sales could be on the way, with hundreds of thousands of fixed-term mortgages set to expire in the next year or so. So what can you do if you think you might need to sell your new home?
Even if you're not in arrears, but you're concerned about how you're going to manage your repayments over the next 6 to 12 months, talk to your bank, talk to services like ours, be informed, be armed with information about your rights. So whatever decision you do make, it's an informed one and you're confident about that decision.
An amazing view.
Yeah, it's stunning.
So to get more about where house prices are going in 2024, CoreLogic's Eliza Owen is with us now. Eliza, what do you think prices are going to do in 2024?
In 2024, I expect the market is going to soften, particularly in the first half of the year and particularly in the higher end of the market. 2023, we had high interest rates, but 2024, we've got high interest rates and that really taking effect on households. We know that savings rates are pretty much at their lowest levels since the GFC. Consumer sentiment is also around recessionary lows and economic growth is slowing. So you'd have to imagine that that will weigh on demand. It's going to be tricky for the market to replicate a 7% growth rate. And already, you know, I think coming into the end of 2023, we were seeing that slow down in the Melbourne market with the decline of 0.2% towards the end of the year.
But we've seen Brisbane, Perth and Adelaide all perform very well in 2023. Are those gains going to fizzle out?
I think it would be hard for those gains not to continue, just considering the supply-demand dynamic. At the end of 2023, you've got Brisbane, Adelaide and Perth running at monthly growth rates of over 1%. In Adelaide and Brisbane, listings volumes are down about a third from where they've been historically. And in Perth, the listings volumes are 40% lower than where they've been. So until you get a kind of remedy in that supply-demand equation, I can't see those markets coming off the boil anytime soon.
Now, when it comes to houses versus units, what kind of price divergence are we seeing and will we see into 2024?
It's been fascinating to look at houses versus units through COVID. Pre-pandemic, there was about an 8% difference between the median house value and the median unit value in Australia. That's blown out to about 29%. I think if we're coming into a cyclical downswing, what you'll see is houses fall faster than units, and that'll narrow the gap a little bit. But honestly, I think, you know, between work from home trends and the change of housing preferences through the pandemic, that premium on detached houses is likely to stick.
And you mentioned a downturn as we see interest rates stay high, potentially for quite a while. Are we going to see forced sales, do you think?
I think we will see a rise in people falling behind on mortgages and maybe having to make a tough decision to sell. But overall, I would expect it to be fairly contained. The reason I think that is because we've already gone through so much of that expiry of low fixed rates to relatively high variable rates. And at the end of 2023, APRA was reporting the arrears rate at just 0.8% of outstanding housing credit, which is incredibly small. We are seeing weakness in other parts of household finances, savings rates, and even a rise in new listings that was pretty unseasonal through 2023. But overall, I think Aussies are doing a lot to make sure that they keep servicing their mortgages on time.
And when it comes to, I guess, the financial position of households, we have seen rents jump substantially over the last few years. Are there some places where it's actually cheaper or more beneficial in the long term to buy rather than to keep renting?
Since the pandemic, national rent values are up about 30%. But believe it or not, in most cases, it's still more affordable to rent than buy. And that's just because of how high interest rates are, combined with the fact that 2023, the Australian property market finished at a record high. Having said that, there are some pockets of the market where rents are growing at such a pace above home values that it might be more feasible to actually just purchase a property. Specifically, these are inner city unit markets. Glendalough in Perth, for example, is a market where we've seen the median mortgage payment, hypothetically, fall behind the median rent payment. Now, that is sort of based on analysis where you have a 20% deposit. If you have even more savings than that, then buying becomes more feasible.
And of course, you mentioned that 2023 finished at a record high in terms of when it comes to prices, supply and demand, obviously out of whack. On the supply side, the federal government has committed to building 1.2 million homes over the next 5 years. Is that going to be enough, or is it even achievable?
I think it would definitely help to ease housing costs, but whether it's achievable, that's another question. Through 2023, we actually saw dwelling approvals fall to be at very low levels, running at about 13,000 a month towards the end of 2023. Your historic average for dwelling approvals is 17,000, and to get 1.2 million homes, you probably need to be closer to 20,000. So that's a result of the high interest rate environment disincentivising some of the larger apartment developments. Construction pressures are still there, even coming into 2024, with rising material costs and building company insolvencies. And a lot has just kind of been stuck in the pipeline. So I think if we are going to get anywhere near that target, it's probably going to be towards the end of the 5-year period.
Eliza, Owen, really great to chat to you.
Yeah, you too. Thanks for having me.
Hey, James. How are you? Nice to see you.
Nice to see you.
Thanks for coming.
Oh,
Come through. Come and have a look.
The value of Australian residential real estate is now more than $10 trillion. And despite Australians being more indebted than ever before, the race to get on the property ladder is not slowing. So what can you do to put yourself out in front? James Dunn, thanks so much for your time. Now, what tips do you have for prospective buyers competing for limited properties on the market?
A good tip is have everything ready before you go to the auction. Make sure you've got your building report done, have a contract ready to go. My advice is if you love a property, go really strong and try and outbid the competition. It is, though, unfortunately, the person with the most money that's going to buy the property at the end of the day.
And in terms of accessing a buyer's agent, does that help?
I think it's really helpful for some people who are time poor, who might be overseas, who can't be at the auction, or are a bit nervous about negotiating on the property as well. They can definitely play a good part on behalf of some buyers. And we're seeing more and more coming into the marketplace now.
And what do you expect stock levels to do in 2024?
We've actually listed quite a few properties coming into the new year. We're probably going to start earlier in the new year as well, probably around the middle of January, whereas a lot of people wait until after Australia Day. That's because I feel that there will be more properties coming on the market the new year, which is great for the buyers, I think.
So what's your outlook for prices in 2024 then?
For houses like this, they're going to be fairly competitive throughout the whole year. I think they're going to stay pretty strong. I think we will see some growth. I don't think it's going to skyrocket, but I don't again think it's going to pull back dramatically. I think it's going to be quite a positive year for 2024.
And given the increasing levels of stock, are you going to continue to put properties to auction, or do you think that there will be less auctions?
The best method to get the best price is by going to auction. We love the auction process. That doesn't mean that properties don't sell prior to auction as well, with people who put some competitive offers in prior to auction.
James Dunn, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Renters are on the front line in the battle to secure a home. Nationally, prices are at record highs and finding a place to rent is becoming more difficult, with the number of available properties at record lows. To see if there's any relief in sight, I'm meeting Ray White's chief economist, Nerida Conisbee. Hey Nerida!
Hey, how are you?
Nice to see you.
Yeah, you too.
Nice to you.
Thank you. Hi, how are you? Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, I really like these features. Nerida Conisbee, do you think it will be easier to find a home in 2024?
2023 was really hard for renters. We did see rents rise pretty much everywhere. In some places, it does seem to be getting a little bit easier. So particularly premium homes, they seem to be stabilising a bit. Houses in general do seem to be stabilising. But overall, we're not building enough homes. We have seen record levels of migration. We built around 50,000 too few homes over the year. And we've also do have a preference for people to spread out. So average household size has been shrinking as well. So all of these factors have combined to make rents more expensive.
So when you say they're more expensive, do you think the rental price outlook is going to be an improving one, or one that we're going to see prices go even higher?
Houses do seem to be flattening in terms of growth, so a little bit more positive for houses. Units do seem to be increasing still. A lot of it has to do with the fact that during the pandemic we did see a drop. A lot of foreign students returned home. They've come back. It did lead to a pretty rapid bounce back in pricing over the year. So it may continue to be a little bit more challenging, but a lot of it has to do with how many additional people we have, how preferences change. We are seeing people move back in together, something that we didn't necessarily expect. And so those factors may balance out some markets.
And as you've kind of outlined, the supply and demand mismatch here is the big reason for prices rising. On the demand side, how much of a factor has the record levels of migration been? We know in the last financial year, 510,000 migrants entered the country.
During the pandemic, we did see very strong rental growth. So it was surprising given that we did have zero migration. We actually had more people leaving the country than arriving. So during the pandemic, that did seem to be driven by people moving out, spreading out. Average household size declined. We did see a record increase in the number of single-person households. Obviously, that was great with zero migration, but then when people started coming back to Australia, we also had that population pressure. So combine that with too few homes, so overall population growth was around 560,000. We built around 170,000, but that's been over a lot of years. Even prior to COVID, we weren't building enough, and at the same time, we were seeing strong population growth.
And on the migration side, the government has recently announced that it's going to scale back the migration levels to more average levels. How immediate will the impact of that be on the rental market, do you think?
It will be fairly immediate. We know that house prices have also moved partly because of population pressure, but the rental market does give us a bit more accurate measure of supply and demand on the market. So it will have an impact. The challenge though with reducing migration is that we still have a very low unemployment rate. So it hasn't been great for sectors such as aged care. They're finding it difficult to get people. Hospitality has been quite problematic. But also the building industry. So on one hand, we do need more people to build more homes, but we also don't have the homes for them to live in while they build the homes.
And how long do you think it's going to take for this rental squeeze to be resolved?
It will take some time. We do know that the Housing Accord is leading to some more positive planning outcomes. So in many states we are seeing planning systems change to allow higher density. Longer term though, Australia does need to become more dense, and this is one of the challenges. We do have a lot of people living in very big homes, which is the number of spare bedrooms, for example. For people that are just a couple, we do see many of them with 3, 4 spare bedrooms. So we do have a lot of people living in very big homes. Over time, we probably do need to not just look at building more homes, but also building appropriate homes for how Australia is changing.
Nerida, thank you so much for your insights.
Thanks for having me.
The rental crisis has pushed more people into share houses, granny flats, and some are even taking up house sitting. Amelia Terzon has been speaking to renters who are in difficult situations.
So what's going on here?
Mike Coates is about to call this granny flat home.
And this one here is a shower setting. Yeah. And that's bathtub. Yep.
The one-bedroom unit in his mother's backyard is costing $100,000 to build. While Mike is very appreciative that his mum is forking out for this, he didn't expect to be here at the age of 44.
I've been trying to get a rental since June last year. The problem I had was I was competing with 50 other people each time. Having Simba here didn't make it any easier.
He's been in the spare room for a year and the granny flat is a longer-term solution.
I've got friends struggling all over the place. There's a lot of people that I know that have just had to go home or give up pretty much their dream of their own home.
Mike's rental prospects aren't getting better. Across the nation, just over 1% of all rentals are sitting vacant. Finding a home is even harder in Adelaide, Perth and Melbourne, where fewer properties are available. Sydney is the most expensive capital city to live in, followed by Canberra, Brisbane, Perth, Darwin, Melbourne, Adelaide and Hobart.
All right, this is our kitchens.
The boss of the company that sold Mike his granny flat says demand has increased during the housing crisis.
The granny flat is no longer for the granny. It's about 50% for the young.
A father himself, Matt worries about where his children will live as they get older.
I don't think there's an easy fix. Just trying to get more rental out there will help, and the secondary dwelling system will help.
With rents still rising and buying your own house getting even more out of reach, people like Mike are feeling stuck. If they're not building a granny flat or moving back in with their parents or a share house, then others are getting even more creative and turning to house sitting during tough times. Cheryl and Richard's long-term lease ended last year, pushing them into house sitting.
It's rent-free and you look after their animals and the home. I think I've really fallen in love with all the dogs that I've looked after and some cats too.
But Cheryl says all of the moving around can get tiring and it is not a long-term solution.
A lot of my friends are actually doing share houses now, and that's a possibility.
Women over 50 are the fastest growing group looking for a flatmate. Eliza Owen says that people moving into share houses will free up more properties and more homes are being built now too.
More vulnerable low-income households need to be depending on a steady supply of social and affordable housing. We're starting to see a lot more of that initiative and policy flow through various levels of government, which is a good thing. Longer term, I would imagine growth in rents is going to continue easing, just because we're expecting that cash rate to gradually move lower through 2024. That will encourage more private investment.
Mike thinks he'll be in the granny flat with Simba for a few years to come.
I'm fortunate that I've had a mum that's been able to do this for me.
But she has started joking that she'll build a hedge between the main house and Mike's new home.
While some are giving up the hunt for traditional rentals, it's not the case in premium suburbs where competition is fierce. Richardson and Wrench rental agent Jonathan Carr says would-be tenants are looking to make their budget stretch further as prices edge up, particularly for smaller properties. What are you seeing in the rental market broadly?
Well, what we're starting to see is that tenants are
drawing back on their expenses. We are seeing migration away from areas. Generally speaking, we are seeing in the premium houses a stability in the rental prices. The lower end of the market being the 1 and 2 bedrooms, we are starting to still see price rises where there is a lot of competition from tenants.
Well, there's been a lot of media about people lining up out the door, fighting over each other to secure a property. Is there any truth to that in the market that you're operating in?
There is an element of truth to it. It is the exception rather than the rule. We do see a number of properties that are exceptionally well attended at the open inspections, but they are few and far between.
When it comes to advice for those would-be tenants, what do you have? How do you get on the top of the list?
Best way to get on the top of the list is just make sure that your application is spot on. The best thing to do is get your online applications sorted out, all of the information there. Come in early to the inspections, get your online applications to the agents as quickly as possible with as much information. The less an agent has to search for information, the quicker you will get a turnaround on your application.
And what are landlords looking for when it comes to prospective tenants?
They're looking for quality tenants at the end of the day. They're looking for a good residential history on a tenant to prove affordability, prove that they look after the property, and at the end of the day, they're just looking for a easy, good quality tenant.
We are in a rising interest rates environment, as we know, even if we are very near the top of the cycle. Have you seen landlords be forced to put up prices in order to cope with those rising rates?
We are seeing that with something like 13 interest rate hikes. Landlords are feeling the brunt of the pressure. Rent rises are being driven by the cost of living expenses on the landlord side. We're not seeing a reduction in the costs on landlords, and that unfortunately has to be borne through on the rental side.
We know that rental vacancy rates are around record lows in many parts of Australia. Have you experienced having less properties to offer when compared to previous years?
Absolutely. We are starting to see, particularly in this upper end 3-bedroom plus market, we are seeing a reduction in the number of properties available. That is mostly as a result of landlords who have gone to the sales market, and we are seeing owner-occupiers taking on those sales, thereby taking it off from the rental stock.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Jonathan, thank you so much for your insights.
My pleasure.
And that's all from this Business Summer Special on housing. For more on our business stories, you can head to the ABC News website, or you can catch up at any time on ABC iView. The Business will return to air weeknights from the 29th of January. I'm Alicia Barry. Thanks for joining me.